The official name, systemic lupus erythematosus. When we talk about this disease, and we talk about it in terms of, and you can tell more about this than I, because every time I talk about it, I have to actually look up information. We talk about it in terms of a butterfly rash, and it goes back to history of this wolf-like bite that looked like, oh, now I'm gonna pop my peas, of this wolf-like rash that used to look like a butterfly rash. Did I get it pretty much like wolf-like rash that turned red, but in darker skinned people, it doesn't look red. So we have special brochures now for African American women and for women of color, so that we can talk about the symptoms of lupus so that everyone can understand and identify with lupus symptoms. Because how many in this room have ever heard of lupus? Very good. How many in this room know someone who has lupus or has lupus themselves? Very good. Because there was a time that we didn't talk about it. We just knew we had this aunt who was in the back of the room who always was talking about how tired she was, or always complained about she didn't feel good. Or we had this sister who would say she was gonna go someplace with us, and then when we all got there and were ready to go, she'd go, I'm just too tired, I can't go. And we were like, what's wrong with her? Or we had this friend who always complained about her aches and pains. Or we had this other friend who would go, oh my God, what's that rash on her face? Look at her, oh my God. Or, this other friend who would go, oh my God, her hair's falling out, what's wrong with her? Or these people in our lives who had things happening to them and we didn't understand. Or they would be so sick one day and then the next day they'd be fine. There was this one usher in our church. She would be in a wheelchair and would have just come out of the emergency room, and the next day she would be strutting down the aisle in her usher's uniform. And I was like, yeah, she says she's sick, but what's really wrong with her? And she has lupus. My very first time that I ever heard about lupus was for the TV show America's Next Top Model. Anybody ever watch that show? Am I just the only old one in here who's ever heard of that show? Nobody else in the room has ever heard of America's Next? Oh, okay, I'm just checking. Anyway, there was this model on the show and she had lupus. I told my daughter, I said, she'll never win because she's got a disease and I don't know what it's about, but she will never, ever win. Later, my daughter ended up with that disease. Right? Wow. Yeah. So, I'm gonna, 10 minutes. Let me just check the clock here, because, as a journalist, I always check the clock. Okay, it's 12:15. I've got less than 5. Okay. You said, happy birthday to Cassandra. Oh, no, I'm good. This is how I work. How many of you are from New Jersey or know the way to New Jersey or plan on ever going to New Jersey anytime soon again? Okay, we're good. New Jersey's walk season is underway. The New Jersey Walk is Saturday, May 11th in MetLife Stadium. Check-in 9 a.m., walk begins at 10, kickoff reception Tuesday, March 26th at the Atlantic Health Jets Training Center, Florham Park. RSVP by March 20th. You got all that, right? I know you got phones and you're busy typing. Okay. I'm going to talk about research at the end because research is a good thing. I know y'all got some bad history, or you say you got bad history. Most of y'all don't even remember the story. You just go, research is a bad thing. I remember Tuskegee. How many of you can actually tell me about Tuskegee and what happened? 1, 2, 3, 4. But the rest of you just go, I remember Tuskegee. Y'all don't remember nothing. Anyway, I have some very good news about research and what it is doing, and especially when we participate. Now back to my daughter. I couldn't talk about it at first because you know me, I start crying every time I do. When I found out my daughter had lupus, I was still a mom in denial. How many of you have ever heard me talk about my daughter and her story? 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, you're going to hear it again. Okay. I wrote a couple of books as fundraisers. One is Brenda Blackmon, A Mom's Story. The other is Awareness Conciencia in Spanish, because a friend of mine had her daughter diagnosed with a biopsy, and the doctors did a biopsy on her face. That's why when I heard someone else talk about doctors and what they don't know, because all doctors are not aware. We as parents have to educate. I had to educate a doctor because one doctor got off my daughter's case when she was hospitalized. She was a doctor who was not aware. She tried to put her on steroids, and my daughter refused to be on steroids. And thank God at the time she wasn't, or she would have died. But back to her story. And I say it because I have to read it, otherwise I just start crying from the beginning and nobody ever finds out anything. And here are the lupus signs and symptoms in case you're having problems. And they may disappear. You may be having these problems one day, and in 2 weeks they're gone, and you go, it's probably all in my head. Well, they may not be in your head. How are we doing on time? Okay, 3 more minutes. Achy joints, fever over 100 degrees, swollen and painful joints, lasting fatigue, skin rashes, anemia, swollen ankles, chest pain when deep breathing, butterfly rash on face across nose and cheeks, sensitivity to sun, unusual hair loss, problems with abnormal blood clotting, pale or purple fingers from cold or stress, seizures, and mouth ulcers. If you have those symptoms, go to the doctor and ask for testing for lupus. There is no one test, and there is no cure. It is not cancer. There are lots of things it's not, and we continue to try and find a cure. Here's my daughter's story in 30 seconds or less. My daughter Kelly has lupus. This was written several years ago. She was first diagnosed in college in 2003. I was in denial, not my child. She was an honor student on her way to law school, gonna marry her college sweetheart and have the life every mom dreams for her daughter. Fast forward 3 years later, I was sitting in the ICU of Inglewood Hospital in New Jersey, holding my daughter's hand. She had lost 30 pounds in less than a month. She was connected to life support. I had cried and prayed at her bedside for 52 days alongside her husband, her college sweetheart. An overnight hospital stay, only this was for real. Lupus attacked Kelly's brain. 14 doctors with specialties in heart, kidneys, lungs, muscle, brain, and nervous system had all given up on her. Even personal friends who were physicians came to say their final goodbyes. After all, for 50 years, there was nothing new to fight against lupus, and nothing is typical with this chronic disease except the suffering. Can you imagine a doctor telling you, your daughter is going to die? You must take her off life support. I ask God to take my life instead of hers. We ask people around the world to pray for her. There was nothing doctors could do, no drugs available to help. We only had prayer. God listened. Kelly opened her eyes. A miracle happened. Those are the doctor's words. And I stand here today praying that you'll take the first step in 50 years to help other people like Kelly who face doctors' hopelessness every day. Now, that was actually a statement that I made to the FDA Advisory Board back in November of 2010. Since then, Kelly learned to talk again, walk again, and is 98% back to where she was. And there is a drug now that helps some people with lupus. And there's also breaking new research. As a research and advocacy partner of the Lupus Research Alliance, the Kelly Fund for Lupus, which I founded, as you mentioned, back in 2008, is proud to let you know about this new development, how research funded by the LRA is making its way to patients. Lupus Therapeutics, collaborating with Takeda Pharmaceutical Company, to evaluate investigational biologic called TAC-079 as a potential new therapy for lupus. The phase 1 trial will be conducted in 20 research centers throughout the U.S. many of which are members of the Lupus Clinical Investigators Network called LUCIN. The phase 1 study is going to be enrolling patients with moderate to severe lupus and aims to evaluate the safety of this drug. To join the trial, patients have to be moderate to severe in this disease activity and not respond well to standard treatment. This is huge.